Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside Procurement, the SmartCube's video forum examining the concepts and ideas that influence procurement and supply chain executives both today and tomorrow. In this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Patrick Foelck, who is the head of strategy and transformation procurement and the head of professional services procurement at Roche. Patrick has had a really interesting career going from consulting to the corporate world and has done a tremendous amount of work and has achieved a lot in the procurement space. And he has some pretty interesting ideas and ambitious ideas that we're going to explore over the course of this video episode. So Patrick, welcome to Inside Procurement.
Hey, welcome, Omer.
So Patrick, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and then we're going to dive into the conversation. But as I mentioned, your background has run from consulting right the way through to the corporate world, which is where you are now at Roche. But if you could give us a quick overview of your background.
Good morning, Omer. Thank you so much for the very kind words and introduction. Very happy to be here today and share some of my thoughts and have a good dialogue with you. But maybe to respond to your sort of question or intro, well, I guess to start with that, I sort of never thought I will end up in procurement. And here we are sort of, 15, 17 years later, I'm more into procurement than I ever thought. I started out, I think I would call it a small boutique procurement consulting firm. I sort of got into it by just accident, really, and have spent sort of 4 or 5 years with them. Really, really enjoyed it. Did a lot of cost turnaround, merger acquisition, post-integration work, lots of work with private equity, fast-paced, big money out, sort of turnaround type work. I thought this can't be everything for procurement. There must be more to it. I really got excited by the time about procurement, the work I was doing, finance, supply chain related work as well. And I felt there must be more. So I moved to one of the big consulting firms, spent, almost 10 years with them. And throughout that time, I really got myself into a lot more that procurement has to offer. So did a lot of transformation work, business transformation work, linked to procurement or finance. I did major sort of cost optimization programs. I did a lot of related work, so technology, digital work, always with a leg or an arm into procurement. And I think my interest kept on growing for that function. And I think my ambition has always been in either the project or the role I'm in now is to do more, right? To do more for procurement, to elevate, I think, the function out of its niche to an extent. It definitely used to be in. And I always wanted this function to be more than just sort of an enabler for some sort of process type work. So towards the end of my consulting career, I had the opportunity to work with Roche, an interesting transformational project where Roche, as one of the major life science companies in the world, still had a very, I think, immature, outdated, I would argue today, looking back, procurement organization, very decentralized, very local. And I came in sort of starting something very small strategy project, advising them on where they could go, what they could do, what the potential is. Sort of the 3 weeks project led into 3 months project, the 3 months led into 1 year project. This 1 year project led into me joining Roche. So in April 2018, and then joined Roche, leaving my beloved consulting world. I still love it. I still operate like a consultant sometimes, I feel, but now being internal. I joined Roche in the capacity of head of strategy and transformation, leading the transformation at Roche procurement. Big link also into finance and shared services work that we are doing. With that role, I picked up a number of sort of line management, teams and business as usual sort of capabilities, analytics, risk, sustainability, contracting, a number of other pieces. And then 1 year into that role, I picked up also the head of indirect or professional services. So everything that we buy except for R&D and direct materials, the big chunk of our spend, I picked up that leadership role too. And that's what I've been doing since, right? And I think throughout that period, which is now 3 years, I kept my connections, my network growing and going. So I'm still very much connected into the consulting world, into many other sort of associations or other people in the network. Yeah. I think my, again, interest keeps on growing on taking procurement. That's the sort of theme of my thinking, keep on evolving to move procurement out of procurement. That's sort of my thinking. Yeah. And that's what we started to do here at Roche, and that's the opportunity that I have here, which is great, to really think beyond and move procurement beyond what it's currently doing. And that's what I'm enjoying about my role. And I really would like to do more in this and share all I'm learning and I'm seeing. And I guess a great thought partner, a great conversation with you today.
Well, I mean, that's a fantastic journey. And we're going to dive into a little bit of this new procurement world, this world that you're moving Roche towards as well in just a second. But you alluded to this. It's an interesting time to have been in procurement over the last decade to a decade and a half or so, maybe a little bit before that as well, but certainly over the last 10 to 15 years, procurement has transformed. Not only in terms of what organizations, corporate organizations are doing, but also in terms of the services and capabilities that are available to procurement. So the supply markets, the tools, the technologies, all of those capabilities they're quite transformative, and they're continuing to transform. I mean, there's more, I mean, you know this already, but there's more VC money that's been flowing into procurement over the last 5 years than probably in the history of the function. I mean, almost certainly in the history of the function. So there's a lot that's been happening and a lot more still to come. So I do want to dive into a little bit of that thinking around your underlying procurement ethos, as well as what you're doing specifically from a transformation perspective at Roche. But before we dive into that, I do have a fundamental question. So in terms of that time that you spent in procurement, which is considerable, you had an opportunity to not only look at the work that you did at Roche, but you looked at multiple companies. You did work across multiple organizations. As you look back on that, how do you think, from a personal perspective, it prepared you for what you're doing today? What did it get you ready for? And actually, I'm also interested in what are some of the things that you were not ready for when you moved into a full-time procurement role within the corporate world?
I could probably talk about this for 2 hours. So I think my career has been giving me lots that helps me to do what I do today, right? So, I mean, the classic sort of consulting experience and learning journey and education is priceless, right? I would not be here today, not be me without that. I think that's the start. Then I think I've seen many things throughout the consulting work I've been doing that I was thinking, that's great, but it's sort of scratching the surface, right? And I've also seen things, we should not have done this, or the client should not have done this, right? It's underselling the value of procurement. It stopped procurement at a certain point. Or I've been thinking, well, there's so much more that procurement can do, right? If we just get engaged and they hire a big consulting firm to get us in to take hundreds of millions out over a 6 month period, right, by negotiating with suppliers, developing some strategies, coming up with demand, cutting exercise, whatever, it's sort of like, it's a drop on the hot stone to an extent, right? There must be more. So I think all of these learnings and experiences, all of the ability I think I've developed to connect things got me to where I am and sort of got me to asking all these questions, right? Yeah. Looking behind this. And sort of throughout that period as well, I've been developing, I think, that thought that we can and we need to do more, right? So there's no other function, I think, that can connect all these dots, right? If you think about it, in procurement, we are connected to a lot of data. I would even argue we have more data available than finance because we have a link into the external market. We have a link into many people we work so closely with, right? Our suppliers. We see data much more than financial data, from all of the business functions. And we have people who can think external, connect internal, right? What's the best solution? Often focus on commercial decision, no questions. But we start to develop also other perspectives in that. So I think we're in a great place. So we've got everything. So it's almost like having all the ingredients to cook a fantastic dinner, right? But we have not managed so far, and that brings me to your sort of intro to the question, we've not managed to cook a great dinner. We've started to promise a great dinner, but we've never managed to, because we've been thinking ingredients, right? We're thinking spend, we've been thinking categories, we've been thinking suppliers, we've been thinking stuff that talks about ingredients, but we have not been thinking, what does our guest, our friend, our partner actually enjoys in terms of food? How do I prepare it? How do I put the tablecloths together, the cutlery and all that stuff, right? We've been thinking procurement, and that has been limiting us. And I think final thought on this, then I got to, I think I got to realize that if we don't change this, if we don't drive that change now, there will be no second chance. We'll be dead, right? Because there are many suppliers out there who can do this for corporations, right? I can buy procurement services today. I can buy lots of the things that we do, I can buy, and I can replace by technology soon, right? And why would the business care so much about having internal function that lives in the past and doesn't talk their language? If I can just buy it, maybe even in parts cheaper, just get the same stuff done, right? So I need to think about the future. I need to think about what else can I do, how to create the value the business is looking for, how can I talk the business language, and how can I adjust and flex myself along their journey rather than thinking my journey, spend, category strategies and all that stuff, right? Yeah. How do I complement myself, and that's the final thought, with the right capabilities, internal and externally, to actually do that and live in the world that we all live in, which is changing all the time and super flexible and everything we experience every day. So I think I've answered 3 questions at once, but that's sort of where I am and how I got here.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. I love that analogy. You know, I think you know, I spent about a decade in consulting as well, and I agree with you. I think the biggest frustration was that you could only go so far as a consultant, and to really then deliver on the change that you promised, it stops right there, and that's frustrating, right? And it sounds like that's exactly what you grappled with, and that's what led you into the corporate world. I think that is fascinating.
But I think to add to this, I think I've been super lucky that I got the opportunity here to actually test my ability to not only talk but actually deliver, right? And actually see it through and land it, and actually move on and do more and better. But also, I've been lucky that I've been given the freedom to enhance and grow it further, right? And that's the part that I've keep on loving and have loved about my role in consulting, right? You get lots of shaping and creating opportunity, which I was very anxious about losing when I moved into the corporate world. Yeah. But I think that's the value of someone like me with that experience coming in, that you capitalize on it. And that's what my leadership here has done, right? I think allowed me to continue to do some of this. And that, I think, has helped us to move towards the sort of goal direction we are moving towards.
And I think also you have chosen an organization, and the organization has chosen you, an organization that's progressive in its thinking, that wants to push the envelope, that isn't satisfied with where procurement used to be, and now is moving in a different direction. I think that's so. Yeah. So to your point, the one point I just said, and then I'll let you chime in on that, is you mentioned, I love the analogy about the meal. I would say I agree with you. I think as a whole, from a procurement function perspective, we're probably still figuring out the ingredients. But I think there are some corporations like yours that are now probably at maybe the appetizer phase of the meal, maybe a little bit pushing along. I don't think anybody's at the dessert phase. I don't think we're there. But I do think it varies by organizations. But I think some of the ideas, and I do want to dive into that, but I think that's what's driving a lot of this value.
And one quick thought on that one. I think in Roche, procurement as a function, I think, is certainly a significant value contributor in terms of productivity. However, productivity, and by that largely I mean savings for now, is not so critical, or wasn't so critical in the past, right? It's becoming more critical. So the business here is more looking for other value from a function like procurement, right? Efficiency and speed, right? Connecting to the right suppliers who have the right product, the right service whatsoever, integrating that service, make it seamless, right? And value for money, but not so much savings. So one example is if I can work with the business to, for the 100 they have, can do 11 clinical trials rather than 10, that's far greater value to them because I can cure more patients. I can have an impact on society. That's what matters to us. And not like, okay, let's save $1 and still do 10 clinical trials. Who cares, right? So with that mindset of an organization, procurement needs to be a different function, right? And at the same time, the business has a lot of money to drive to their goals at their pace and in their sort of mindset and direction. So if they feel procurement is in the way and is not delivering the 11th clinical trial, who needs procurement? Get out of my way and I buy my own procurement, right? I buy my own technology. So we are challenged not by can you deliver more savings, but actually can you be helpful? Can you deliver impact? Can you deliver value, right? And real value, not just the procurement talk about value. And I think that's what gave us and me the ability to really like live in this environment and sort of grow procurement, right? And lift it out of its niche of we are a savings delivery engine.
Yeah. And I think, and that relates to your other point that you made around we have a small window of time to make that impact. Back in the 80s, back in the 90s, the business would just do it themselves. I don't need procurement. I know what procurement does and it doesn't add value, right? Now, we're sort of in this middle phase, right? Where people are seeing some value, there's some potential, there's some interesting ideas, but if we don't deliver on it, we're going to lose that opportunity. And there are plenty of companies out there in the supply market who are ready to say, I'll take it all on. Give it to me, we'll do it, right? And I think that's absolutely right. So in line with that, how, if we can sort of talk a little bit about your procurement ethos, and I'm going to come to the Roche transformation story in a second, but from a personal perspective, how do you see procurement, and you've touched on it right now with that R&D example, for example, how do you see procurement driving value creation across the business? What's your vision for what procurement ought to be?
Okay, so I think to start the response to that or answer that question, I think we need to think about what is that potential value. And that value is different company to company, but also business partner, stakeholder to stakeholder, right? And taking Roche as an example, we have functions and business partners here who need productivity because for some of our products, we are in a very competitive market. So input price and therefore competition is critical. They are looking for productivity. R&D are looking just for speed and innovation, right? Help me to do more, faster, better, right? Yeah. Others are looking for risk mitigation, sustainability. We are a very sustainable company. Many things that we do are measured by the impact on society. So I think we need to understand what that value is that we need to deliver, and then sort of, I think, tailor, and that's the challenge then, tailor our output that we deliver towards these individual goals of the different functions. And this one size fits all, here you have some savings, right, that the business anyway in the past didn't care so much about. Some businesses, some functions, right, is definitely not the solution in the future, in my opinion. There are some companies and some functions, also in Roche, who need savings, but it's not about everything that we do. So this one-hit wonder, right, procurement, savings engine, that definitely, in my point of view, is not the answer for the future. And then the challenge here is, how do we flex ourselves? And that's I think something we talk about later, how do we flex ourselves and set ourselves up to do that, right? And how do we complement the different capabilities that we need to actually be successful? I think that's sort of where I would start to answer your question.
I think that's at the right conceptual level to start, right? Which is, we can't keep doing the same things for everybody. Not everybody's interested in the same thing. So you gave plenty of examples. I think marketing and legal in the indirect space are other examples where the dollar savings aren't paramount there. It's more about the quality of work that's being done, the quality of counsel they receive, the creativity, the service, et cetera. And anybody who goes and saying, I can reduce the quote unquote unit cost for you is going to get thrown out. You won't even get the first chance to get the second chance to play in that situation. And then therefore driving, taking that and then setting up the right organization to be able to cater to that, I think is critical.
And I think, so once we've figured out what's the value we need to deliver, right? We need to think about how do we do that, right? And how do we do that leveraging all the capabilities you mentioned earlier? I hate the word, but it is a good one here, the ecosystem, right? Appreciating that procurement and the outside world has moved on so significantly. You mentioned VC money, you mentioned digital, you mentioned technology, whatever it is, right? So once I figured out what I need to do and how I could do it, the question is on who to an extent and how I set myself up. So I think you need to find the right sort of mix of what's at offer. So for example, the right base technology, the right mix of digital assets, the right capabilities, the right external resources to support us and complement us, right? And that key thing, so back to some ingredients here, right? Now I need to find the right way of operating an organizational setup to piece all of this together to make an amazing 3-star dinner, right? And that is the biggest challenge. I think we are good at sort of maybe identifying what are the good ingredients, what I need here and there, but piecing it together and sort of making sense of it, I think that's the challenge. And it also, and that's the final thought, requires us to challenge some of our 80s or 90s thinking in terms of category management. In my opinion, the old way of thinking category management is dead, right? I even think the traditional way of procurement soon could be dead because technology is replacing it. And hence, we need to move on and understand how do we put these ingredients together to cook this 3-star, right, dinner. And to make it more concrete and not just talk theory here. So I've had this challenge here of understanding how I can automate and self-service more for the business to take some of the capacity this would free up in procurement to invest in more of the value add work. For example, focusing people on working with suppliers on new services we could offer to the business, right? Investing into sustainability, investing in risk management, all that good stuff needs to be paid for. Right? I need people. And I can't these days make a procurement case really on, I need more money to save more money. That is sort of conflicting with the rest I've been talking about. So I needed to figure out how I can use technology and digital and content, which is super critical here, to actually create some of this self-service automation experience that we have in our personal lives, and then free up that capacity to invest in all the other areas. And I can talk about more how we did this, but I think that is, the future, right? Where we need to be and how we need to move on from the past into the future.
Well, thanks, Patrick. This has been a fascinating conversation. There's a lot more that we want to cover, which we're going to pick up in our next episode of this video.
Thank you so much for your time and great dialogue. We're looking forward to seeing you soon again and continuing this fantastic dialogue.
Thank you.